Hello everybody and welcome to video number 32 in my Richard Laymon horror novel review series. Today I'm talking about Endless Night from 1993. So let me get straight in with it. Here's the cover art by Steve Crisp, and I really like it. Most Steve Crisp cover arts have some kind of knife or machete or axe on the cover somewhere, but I love this one because he's put the detail there of Jodie and Andy, the two protagonists, in the machete. And there's all the usual Steve Crisp blood going on there, dripping off it. Nice moon shining through. So it's a really good cover art. This comes in at 470 pages. And here's the back. It says, Jodie Fargo is sweet 16 but tougher than she looks. She has to be. She's sleeping over at a friend's when the killers break in. They slaughter the family, but Jodie escapes, rescuing 12-year-old Andy on the way. Simon Quirt doesn't seem like the kind of fellow who would rape and murder in the dead of night. But, together with his friends, that's just what he does. Now Simon is alone. His task is to track down the only eyewitnesses to the massacre and dispose of them. Simon just can't wait to get his hands on Jodie. Yeah, so Endless Night, along with The Cellar, which was Laymon's debut novel, Endless Night is, I think, Laymon's most notorious book because it's just wall-to-wall nastiness. It's just so cartoonishly over the top in its violence and its gore and its descriptions of rape and murder and torture and beheadings and eviscerations and every kind of evil that a human being has ever done to another human being is in this book somewhere. And if you are a Laymon fan, you're probably going to love this because it's everything that we like about him. But it's very easy to see why this book has so many one-star reviews on Amazon. I just checked that website before doing this review, and it has an unusual amount of one-star reviews. And everyone pretty much saying the same thing, that it's just too much. It's too over the top. They found the violence too sickening to get through. And but it is interesting that most of the people who say that do say that this is the first Laymon book they'd ever picked up, and they're never going to pick up another one again. So that speaks volumes to me because, again, Laymon is certainly not for everyone. But he is for me, hence I am now 32 videos into an overview of all of his work, and this is one of his best books in my opinion. It's an interesting one, but in some ways it's a unique one in many ways because it uses a mixture of the first-person narrative and the third-person narrative. It begins in third person, but then it switches to the killer's perspective. Basically, the killer is speaking into a cassette recorder that he's come across. Now, to explain why Laymon has chosen that narrative technique, let me talk a little bit about the plot. So as it says there, well, the plot couldn't be simpler. It's a home invasion story. It's this group of young lunatics. They're in their early 20s. And they formed this odd little club of psychos. They call themselves the Krulls, which is obviously a callback to the group of cannibalistic maniacs in Richard Laymon's second novel, The Woods Are Dark. And Laymon mentions in the book that they did take their name from an unnamed horror novel by an unnamed writer, but it's obviously him referencing himself, and good for him for doing that. He deserves it. No one else was referencing him, so he might as well do it to himself. And anyway, so these Krulls, what they do is basically they just break into homes and they murder everyone they find there. But before murdering them, they, like I said before, they rape them, they torture them, they mutilate them, and they just desecrate them in every conceivable way. Why do they do it? Don't know. Not explained. I mean, that's not the kind of thing Laymon does. And to talk a little bit about the main villain here, Simon Quirt, he is, in my opinion, Laymon's nastiest baddie. He's his most messed up, and the things that he does are the most horrendous. He's a scary human being, but that doesn't necessarily make him a good villain, if you know what I mean, because the things he does are horrendous. But there's in literature and in horror films, there has to be more to a great villain than just doing awful things. I mean, there has to be some level of interest. The reader or the viewer has to be engaged in this person, not just repelled or revulsed by what they're doing, but you have to want to get inside their head and kind of walk around in their shoes a little bit and try to make sense of what's made them this way. Think of the great horror villains of like Hannibal Lecter from Thomas Harris, or Randall Flagg from Stephen King, or Pennywise from King. The ultimate horror villain, Count Dracula. Simon Quirt is not that, and Richard Laymon doesn't do that. He doesn't really go into the psychological depth of a serial killer. What Laymon does is he just describes awful people doing awful things. And if you don't mind that, then this is the book for you. I don't mind it, and that's why I like this book. I've said it many times during this series, but I don't go to Richard Laymon books for psychological insight. I go to them for breakneck pace storytelling and completely off the wall, bizarre turns of events, and that's what this book gives you. Right, so to talk then about that narrative technique I mentioned, starts off first person, and we're introduced to Jodie and Andy and Jodie's father, who's a police officer, and another police officer called Sharon. So there's a quartet of characters who are running away. They're escaping the house where this horror has taken place. They're going on the run while the police can try and catch the killers. But then one of the killers, Simon, like I said, comes across a tape recorder, and he decides to speak into this tape recorder and make a record of who they are, what they do, how they do it, and to an extent why they do it. Why is he doing that? Well, Laymon explains it away via Simon as Simon's mates, Simon's buddies, are now threatening to murder him and everyone that he cares about if he doesn't track down the two eyewitnesses to their crime, i.e. Jodie and Andy. Jodie is 16, Andy is 12. So he wants to have a bit of leverage in that situation. He wants to have some insurance so that he can kind of blackmail them back and say, well, look, if you do anything to harm my loved ones or me, then I've got a bunch of tapes over here which the police will find and you'll all be caught. So that's how Laymon gets around the very unlikely scenario of this maniac actually talking into a cassette recorder and noting everything they do. As always with Laymon, suspend your disbelief. Don't go looking for too much realism in his books. It's not what he's about, and you're not going to have a good time if that's what you expect from him. You're going to have a wonderful time with Laymon if you just completely set aside all the rules of logic and just go with the flow. So that's the style, and the style is good, by the way. By Layman's standards, this is a well-written story. There's not so much of the stuff that I've criticized in him. There are not so many sex scenes. In fact, now that I think of it, there are no sex scenes other than the rape ones, which, as weird as this sounds, are preferable to his normal sex scenes because at least they don't make me cringe so much. Yeah, there's no sex scenes in this. That's another thing that I just realized. And there is, because Andy is only 12 years old, he is still a bit of a pervert. Every male Laymon character is going to be. But there's less of the kind of obsessive need to catch a glimpse of a woman's breasts all the time, or like having monomaniacal fixations on how a woman's nipples look and behave in various temperatures. There's none of that. Well, not none, but none would be asking too much. But there is comparatively little of that in this book. I appreciated that. And it just flows very well. There are not many really clunky lines and phrases. Sometimes a Laymon book will have a turn of phrase, which is just so inept and you'll roll your eyes. But this isn't like that. This was written the same year as Savage, 1993. And Savage is by far and away his best written book, at least best written book, maybe his best novel as well. But in terms of style, it's a step above. So this is from that same time period. And it shows, I mean, he is in total mastery of the type of craft that he wanted to master by this point. This is the peak era of Richard Laymon. What else do I want to say about this? Yeah, so the quartet of characters, I found them to be very likable. I mean, the good guys. The bad guy, like I said, I mean, he's okay. He's a very nasty person. Nothing especially interesting about him, but as Laymon villains go, he's a good one. What he does, again, is just so cartoonishly evil. The stuff that these guys are doing, that by the end of it, I was laughing at some of this stuff. That's the best way to approach this. If you read this almost as a horror comedy, it's fantastic. If you are one of those people who aren't really sold on Richard Laymon's style, you are going to be kind of sickened by a lot of this, I think, as many people were if we, like I said, go off Amazon reviews. Let me talk a little bit about the ending. No spoilers. I'm not going to spoil this because if you've not read it, I really want you to. But Laymon isn't always very good at ending his long novels. But that doesn't apply here. This is a really good ending. I thought that the use of the third person technique, as improbable as it is, was justified when I got to the ending, and I realized how Laymon had used that in quite a clever way in order to pull the rug out a little bit on the reader and on the other characters, and throw in a little bit of a twist. So I thought that was really well done. Laymon had obviously planned this book better than he sometimes planned others of his close to 500-page novels. It's obvious that he went into this with a clear idea of how he wanted to end it. So what else to say? Oh yeah, a little thing here. Laymon almost never went into politics in his books, and thank God for that. But this is a very rare example where we get a glimpse of Richard Laymon's own political leanings, because there's like a really weird random 20-page section here, which is like an advertisement for the National Rifle Association, and we get like a lecture on responsible gun ownership and why guns are a good thing and stuff like that. Now, I have no opinion on the Second Amendment. I'm British. The Second Amendment and gun ownership is purely America's business. It's not my business. All I want to say, the reason I'm bringing this up is that it's just an unusual feature of this book that we get a very odd, strident, impassioned defense of gun ownership in this book. Very obviously from Richard Laymon himself, not from the character who delivers this argument. So, yeah, just something new. It's neither good nor bad. I'm just saying that it's something unusual to see in a Richard Laymon book. I think that they call it authorial intervention in literature, in literary criticism, when a writer puts his own ideas into a book. Well, we get some of that here. And some less than PC comments on things like feminism, but I've already figured out that Laymon wasn't the most politically correct person in the world. But anyway, let me end by saying that this is a incredibly readable book. I don't know... I think some people might actually be a bit turned off by the opening of this novel because there's not a lot of tension in it. The book gets straight down to business from the first page. I mean, these guys break in literally on the first page, and then Jodie came awake moaning, "Wake up, Jodie, wake up, please." The first page, someone's broken in downstairs, and within pages, the killings begin. But the problem is that we know that they escape. We know that Jodie gets away, and we know that Andy gets away, because it tells us on the back there. So there's not a great deal of tension in the first 50 pages. There's not much writing on it, because, like I just said, we know how it ends. But once I got beyond that opening scene, and the kids do escape, it really gets going. It kicks into gear so fast, and it's just, like I said, breakneck paced storytelling. Something that Richard Laymon had down to a science and to an art form, and that I don't know of any other horror writer who had that gift. I mentioned this in my previous review of Night in the Lonesome October, and well, I've mentioned that in most of these reviews, that his gift to make readers turn pages was completely unparalleled, in my opinion. So, all right, let me end this then. Endless Nights from 1993. Enjoyable, likable characters, a decent enough villain, a simple story but very well told with a bit of a twist in the tale at the end. Highly recommended. Thanks everyone for watching this. If you did watch this far, as I make this video, it is Christmas Eve. So very happy Christmas tomorrow to any of you who celebrate that holiday. And take care of yourselves. I'll be back soon with another Laymon review. 32 down, 3 more to go. So bye for now everyone. Take care. Bye for now.